time because yesterday, so I came out with this book. It was a picture book in, well, it was in the fall last year. And it was the first photography book I've ever done. All the others are just words, right? And you kind of imagine what that might have looked like. But this one, it was a photograph of something that wasn't super interesting all on its own.
Okay.
And it's stuff that I could find as I was walking around. I love to walk around old cities. And
Yeah, landmarks and things. You find like that cool little corner with that coffee shop, and it's got like that 180-year-old worth of history, right?
well, this was even more micro than that. It was like
Whoa.
it was if you take the bubble gum that's stuck to the sidewalk outside of that 180-year-old like coffee shop, right? It was stuff that people would absolutely pass by, ignore, not think a second thing about. And I started asking myself, well, what if these little details, what if these little mundane objects, that's what I ended up calling the book, Meditations of the Mundane. And what if they had a story, like a backstory? What if they had hopes and dreams? And one of them so I went down to about a town about 2 hours away on the coast yesterday. And it's one of those that I walked all over the downtown for
East or
several
West
hours.
Coast?
East Coast,
Okay.
North Carolina.
Yeah, because we're both East Coasters. Okay. I
Okay.
totally. All right. I should have. Sorry, West Coast. But
Well, East Coast is just older, it's grittier.
it is.
It's got that history to it.
You have like the first colonies that started in the East Coast.
Yeah.
So there's just so much that what I find so interesting, and like you're pointing this out so clearly, is those mundane, stupid, like, quote unquote, it's like stupid little things. It's like, why is that tree stump there? Like, why do you have a tree stump?
Yeah.
And there's like the whole element and story of like, I don't know, like, there was like a landmark or something that happened, and it's just there.
Yeah. And it's just there until somebody decides they want to quote unquote improve it or, modernize it. And it's funny.
Paint it white.
Yeah. Make a squirrel sculpture out of it. I've seen that happen. But yesterday I was walking around and I was actually revisiting a lot of the places that I worked on the book, like pictures that I took. And some of those things aren't the way they were when I photographed it like a year ago or 2 years ago. And a great example is I was walking along the Riverwalk, downtown Wilmington, North Carolina, my hometown, but I don't live there anymore. So I have to go back and visit, have to be intentional about it. But it's got this, 200 some year old river front. Just that's where the docks used to be. That's where all the stuff used to go out on ships back to England, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's a lot of history there and there's a lot of old stuff, but not quite as old. But there was this river walk and there was this building that had super old wood siding on it. And someone, some teenagers had carved a heart and they carved their initials into it. And it was a pretty cool image for the book. And I kind of crafted a story around, who these people might have been, what led up to them feeling inspired to create this, carving on the siding. And that was in the book. And that was probably 2 years ago that I took that picture. Well, I went back yesterday. I cracked the book open to that page and I was just doing some videos, some B-roll to make a sales trailer for this book and put it down. I got to that spot, put the book down, and there were all these carvings on this wall at this point. And they were in hearts and, initials and all this stuff. And I was like, okay, cool. Somebody saw the first one and got inspired. Well, come to find out, the one that was in the book, it had all been scratched out. Right. It's like they came back and they were like, yeah, we broke up. So we're erasing this from history. And so now you're talking about a moment in time. I've got it where it was like real. It was pristine. It was maybe, a year or two after it had gotten there. But now those two people aren't together anymore.
No, and honestly, you bring up something that is just so wild, especially like I come from a place that was like 90 miles outside of New York City. And where I grew up for a very long time, it was quiet.
Mm,
Even though it was like you drive a little further down and like New York City's right there.
yeah.
But as time progressed, it became more and more overgrown. There's not enough infrastructure, and the whole entire environment like completely changed around it. And when you look at photography, this is the craziest thing. And like I even remember this. When you look at photography of what it looked like 2006 compared to 1965,
Yeah.
yeah, a few
Yeah.
things changed. A few buildings, a few neon signs came down, but it's pretty much the same. But then you go from like 2006 to 2020, and it's just,
Yeah. Like what happened?
what the fuck happened?
Yeah. Yeah, I get that. And it's like that in a lot of places because people just started migrating, shifting, and then you had the 2020 happen and everybody kind of stood in place and people thought, okay, do we build office buildings anymore? Is that a thing? Like what's next? And then they started building office buildings that had residents in them, at least around where I live, and that's the thing now. So pretty
It's
wild.
so wild because when you look at, again, this is why, like, especially people like yourself, is so great because when you look at the elements of photography, especially when you're putting them together and you just see like the story within time, people in this country in particular have kind of gravitated towards living suburb lives, you know,
Yeah.
and still enjoying somewhat of the larger cities. That's kind of why we have the interstate. There's a reason why, the suburbs was kind of invented after World War II to be able to make it affordable for people to live. But that's not really a case anymore. And I mean, again, like you could be an amazing photographer, but like you go to those environments, you go to those urban development areas and you take those photographs, regardless of what you take, it looks like the takedown of human society replaced by global corruption, and the giant ass bill for the next 50 years. It's just like there's no artistic element you can add to something. Like, I don't know any other way of
Yeah.
explaining it.
No, you're right. I've got this one part so there was one section where I did just a really long walk on a greenway out in the suburbs. And a lot of the stuff was kind of based in nature, the things you might see. For example, I was walking on the greenway one of the days and I looked down and there was just this kind of almost dried mud where you could tell it had been wet maybe the day before. And now if you stepped in it, it wouldn't get on your shoe, but your shoe would still leave an imprint. But I could clearly see in that little patch, and it was just right on the edge of the pavement, but I could see where a bike had gone through and left a really distinct impression.
Oh,
And then I could
God.
also see a footprint that someone had left a really distinct impression. I was like, man, that's really cool. That's a moment in time, but that'll be washed away the next time it rains, which is really cool. And so that was kind of the nature element of some of the things I saw. But then I would see these on the backside of neighborhoods because they don't put greenways. They usually put it kind of along the river where people, it's really the flood zone. Like if the river overflows, that's where it's going to come. So you can't build anything there. So if people are going to enjoy it, let's just pave a walking path. That seems cool.
Yeah, they do the same thing here in Florida. It's
Okay.
very, very commonplace. I mean,
Yeah.
pretty much any like lakefront, riverfront you go to, there's some form of a pathway. Or people
Yeah.
usually they put I don't know what they do in Carolina, but they have it's like a barrier. So like they'll
Okay.
put like either like rocks or sand like at the very edge of their
Yeah.
land, like before it hits the lake.
Okay.
Like so I don't own land. I don't own a house next to a lake. But I totally get what you're saying though. There's like those, it's just like that, like what the hell are we gonna do with this?
Yeah,
You know,
well, there's also the element like these greenways kind of weave themselves through these suburban neighborhoods. And
yeah,
one thing I noticed one time were these retaining walls, and they were made of these really large bricks, not bricks like you'd build a house with, but f- big bricks, kind of like cinder blocks, but they're made to be a little bougier looking than cinder blocks.
so like a sandstone color. It's not like
It,
totally like white.
Exactly. It was a sandstone color, and I just looked at it, and the sun was coming off of it just right. And I was like, man, this is kind of the perfect metaphor for suburbia, because these are all they're all kind of the same, and they're all a little bit different because they've got pretty rough texture, and they're made to look kind of like a stone block wall, but they're all beige, like that sandstone color. And I was like, damn, if that's not the perfect, you know, analog for suburbia, I don't know what is, because it's like everything's kind of beige, everything's kind of the same, trying to be a little bit different, but it's all homogenized to be pretty boring. And
Yeah,
welcome to suburbia. Yeah.
I mean, have you watched the show Severance by any chance? I've
No, I
talked about
haven't.
this on the. I've talked about this on the. It's an amazing show that was made with Ben Stiller, and
Okay.
another director. But like, pretty much every single scene is pretty boring. You know, in like regards to like color layouts. Like they're in an office, they're underground. It's like kind of 70s ish.
Okay.
It's kind of not. It's kind of weird, you know, because like they're all driving like old K10 pickup trucks, but then they got a modern smartphone. But then they
Okay.
use like one of those mechanical calculate. It's one of those just
Oh,
shows
wow.
that's just it's just artsy and baffling and weird and doesn't really make any sense, but it's just beautiful to watch.
Yeah.
I love those kind of elements because you can take boring and make something fun out of it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you could take a boring like fluorescent office complex and make the floor green.
Yeah. Right.
Green. Ugh. Green. But it kind of adds that element of almost like you're not in nature. Are you in nature? Are you not in nature? Are you in nature?
Yeah.
It
Exactly.
fucks
And
with you. It does. It really
yeah,
does.
no doubt it kind of messes with your brain. And I mean, that's what designers do best. They very much under the surface try to
So good.
get to the things that pull your strings and either make you feel at home or not feel at home. I mean, there are a lot of places where the designers intentionally create lighting that doesn't make you feel really welcome, and you don't know why at first, but it's just places they don't want you to stay there. And like transitional spaces in public especially is like, we want to design this lighting so it doesn't really feel cozy, doesn't make you feel welcome or at home, and so you move along to wherever else you need to be. And very much part of design. I love there's a podcast called 99% Invisible. Have
Oh
you
wow.
ever heard of
Great
that?
name.
Yeah, but it's all about design, and it's all about the things that designers think about that the general public would never think about, but they use those elements of design to subtly influence people's behavior. And it's just fascinating. Just it could be any kind of topic, sound design, visual design, lighting design. I mean, there are people who are experts at controlling your mind and your
Yeah.
behavior who you're like, what kind of Jedi mind trick is this you're doing? And they're just using normal physiology and human behavior, but they're just coming at it from a completely unexpected way.
I think it's also very interesting where not only like the psychology, but the way you have the intricacies of color. Greatest example is that you know you take like those Japanese. I love it's like Japanese drama series,
Mm,
and it's like all of a sudden like whenever there's an action scene, it gets dark, you
yeah.
know, and there's like red and white and yellow, and it's just like you know, and like it's just getting like ugh. And they get into like a still shot. It's not moving. It's just a
Yeah.
still shot that you're watching and you're like feeling the buildup of action come with it. It's because like the image is the action, you know, like you know, Americans like now are like ripping off that idea. You know, like we get TV shows like Invincible, which is literally that times a million.
Mm, No, that's cool.
Artsy
I
fartsy.
love, yeah, love the art and love the different perspectives on that and how people tell an action sequence. Pretty cool because
It
there's a
it's
lot of
hard.
complexity to it. Yeah,
Yeah. It's not like you're fucking making like 1,000-piece puzzle, man. Like I think it's a little more than that.
yeah,
You know?
yeah. There's a lot to it, and I mean, as a still photographer for like a long time, I can't even wrap my mind around sequences in motion picture. So I look at some of this stuff and I'm like, shit, how'd they do that? Like, or not how they do that. I can break down how they did it, but it's like how they come up with that, in the first place
It's
to put a
genius.
sequence together in a way that tells a story. And really, I mean, that's what motion pictures are, is it's just really short clips of motion, and they put them together in such a way with the angles to bring you into the story. You start wide, you go in a little closer, and the next thing you know, you're at the end of someone's foot in an action sequence, and the camera goes black, right? Because you're knocked out. So yeah, it's pretty awesome.
There's just so many pieces that come together to be able to make it a reality. And I was remember reading before, there was a director that made a film that had no dialogue. It was just
Oh,
animals, the entire film.
okay.
And
Whoa.
it's like, I don't know, an adventure with like a cat or something. I if I found the name of it, I'll find it eventually. But that to me just screams, again, artsy fartsy. It's like,
Yeah.
can we make a movie with no dialogue? And believe it or not, like, there are movies that have no dialogue for periods. Great example is Quentin Tarantino. The amount of
Yeah.
times that man has just dun-dun-dun,
Right.
dun-dun,
Yeah.
But I again, like, I think what we're trying to get at is that photography and moving film and like the written word all kind of symbiotically works together as one
Yeah.
a lot of
Yeah.
times to make that storytelling a reality.
Yeah. And it's funny, you reminded me of something my grandfather used to say. He came from the old days where you would get together with your neighbors, your family, the people in your community, and they didn't really even have radio in the beginning, right? So they certainly didn't have television yet. And you would bring a musical instrument, like if you had a fiddle, what they called them, or if you had a guitar, or if you had whatever you could bring, tambourine, who knows, harmonica. But he said, yeah, when we would get together, some people would be playing the music and then some people would be singing. And if you didn't sing really well, you made sure you played your instrument a little louder. And if you didn't know how to play your instrument really well, you would sing a little bit louder. And that's kind of what you're describing with some of these movies. Like if you're not great at dialogue and you don't have maybe the talent, the actors, that kind of thing, who can pull off the dialogue that you've created, well, then make those action sequences a little better. Make the music a little louder, right? Make the visuals a little more impactful. But I'll never forget one of the coolest movies I ever saw. And I was young. I was like right in college, so it would have been cool anyway. But it was called Slackers. And not to be confused with Slacker, which is a completely different movie, as I came to understand. But Slackers was a very low budget film. I think it was made. The director went on to do a lot of really cool movies, but I think this was made like right after he got out of film school. Didn't have a whole lot of backing. Takes place in Austin, Texas, before Austin got bougie. And
liberal and Joe Rogan-y.
Yeah, maybe it was still. Yeah, that could be true, but it was the gritty Austin from the early 90s, late 80s.
Wow West.
It was so dialogue heavy. It's such a crazy film because the whole premise of the film is you never really follow any one of the characters for very long, because you'll follow a character until they meet another character, and they'll have this insane conversation that is so off the wall. You're like, how did they even think about this? And then what happens is the camera starts following the person they were talking to until they kind of wander into another interaction with someone else. And then the camera just follows that person along on their day or their journey or whatever's happening. And that was like, man, that's just huge. Just like the storytelling in that, I have never seen it really since, actually, that I can think of in that format. But it was really cool, really impactful, but super dialogue heavy. I mean, it had some decent visuals, but it relied more on the interaction between the characters and just the holy shit factor. Like that was crazy how they come up with that. Yeah.
It really is something special, because a lot of the times what you're seeing is, especially when you're dealing with writing, it's coming from somebody else's perspective. Somebody that either has that experience happen to them, or they've either are journalists and, they've traveled around and been able to gain that information. But when those pieces are applied, you end up with somebody that not only can articulate a really great story, but it magnifies. It reaches not only like the director and the producer and everybody that's on board on crew, but also the actors that are portraying these characters told in these words. Everything kind of almost has that echo effect to it in order for it to work.
Yeah. And I mean, I don't know how it plays with the general audiences, with the general public, but it's like the thing I've found, especially with any kind of art, as an artist matures, what happens is their art becomes more nuanced. Like the message behind it becomes more subtle because they don't have to scream, they don't have to beat it over anyone's head. But then also they run the risk of losing part of their audience, right? Because some people just aren't going to get it. And I've seen films like that. Like in some ways, Memento was like that for me. And in some ways, I've just seen films where it's like, oh my gosh, that I can tell that I'm supposed to get this and understand it on a completely different level. I'm just not there yet. So I can respect it. I just don't understand it quite yet. And
I totally get that, man. Oh my God. Yeah. I had that with the Big Lebowski.
Dude.
For me, the Big Lebowski
ever.
Was the moment for, and I had. I was living in Israel, and at the time, like, I got introduced to Israeli hippies. And if you ever meet these people, they're some of the coolest. They're not like American hippies. They're usually people that like own coffee shops. They do breweries. They work like they live in kibbutz. A lot of them own like very old vehicles too, so it's kind of hilarious. Like those old boxy Volvos,
those Mercedes like 240 diesel.
Yeah. So I remember he was like talking to me about this. He's like, first thing he told me, he was like, "You're a libertarian." And I said, "Excuse me?" And he's like, "You're a libertarian." And he's like, "I'm going to prove it to you." I said, "Okay." He's like, "I need you to watch The Big Lebowski."
Oh,
I'm like, all right. He's like, "You got to understand dudism." And I'm dead ass serious. Like, we went to a friend of his. We sat down on a couch. He rolled a fat ass joint, and there was like a bong on the table. We watched the movie through, and it was like 2:00 in the morning.
And it made no sense, I bet. Not damn bit of sense. Yeah.
Not at all.
That's exactly my reaction too. Dude, yeah. I got the dude. I got a record vinyl of the dude right here on my wall. Love the dude. But yeah, like after about the third or fourth, you're like, oh, I see what this is about, man. And yeah, what a wandering story that was, right? And if you really think about the dude too much, the movie, the plot of it, you're like, yeah, like I see a lot of issues. But if you're just willing to be entertained, can't do better.
Nope. I mean, listen, through and through, the man peed on his carpet. You know, that's the moral of the story.
He
The man peed
peed
on his
on
carpet, and
the
like
dude's carpet. Yeah.
somebody's got to be responsible to replace that shit. You know,
It really held the room together. It really tied the room together.
it
Yeah,
really
that's what
did tie the room
yeah,
together, like
really
dead
did.
ass. You know, like the third time in, you're like, oh, I kind of understand why the man's pissed off. Like, I mean, besides the fact that like his car is a piece of shit, probably hasn't showered in days,
Right.
and he has a man that is divorced, but yet screams to the high heavens, "It's fucking Shabbos, Donnie. I don't drive on Shabbos." I'm
That's
like,
right.
Jesus, you know? But honestly, when you break it down in its simplest form, I had we're still friends. She's a photographer, and her interpretation of photography is that very essence of that. It's just a random, I don't know, like a picture of a building.
Mhm.
It's, you know, like we were talking about, like just a picture of a fence, you know, and you can kind of like picture that vibe. And then when you watch a movie or a film that has that kind of vibe, it's kind of those pieces come together. I think what we're not realizing is that before we had this,
Yeah.
that was our social media. It's just photography and just seeing and walking around and seeing cool shit. You know, we turned that into a phone that we carry with us everywhere.
Yeah, which took the value down quite a bit because now there's so much. Now I have to ask you, like, this is a conspiracy talk.
Let's
Big
get into it.
Lebowski.
Oh, I fucking love this shit. Let's go.
No, okay, so Big Lebowski has got a lot of layers to it, and
It
first
does.
time you watch it, you're like, "That's what the hell was that about? I don't even understand." And then the third time you watch it, you're like, "Oh, okay, that's kind of genius. I see where it's going." I was the exact same way with Fight Club. You watch Fight Club, and the first time I watched Fight Club, I was pissed off. I got to the ending, and I was like,
What the fuck?
I'm watching this shit the whole time, thinking
that ending is just
yeah. Yeah, I was
Why?
mad. I was physically like, I want my money back. I wasted 2 hours of my life. But like the 12th time I watched it because I was like, okay, this has so many layers to it. Okay, so
I've only
the
watched
theory,
it twice.
The theory with Fight Club is that we know, okay, for anyone listening or watching, like this is going to be some spoiler shit right here. So maybe just turn it off if you've never seen it. If you're interested,
spoiler
maybe just
alert.
Hit that fast forward for a second.
Ding, 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 ding.
But the whole theory of Fight Club is that Marla never existed. She was also a figment of the narrator's imagination, just like Tyler, right?
Wasn't there a movie by Ron Howard that had kind of the same premise? Hold on. I think it came out in 2001.
So not
A
long
Beautiful
after.
Mind.
A beautiful, yeah, exactly, yeah. So like it was all a part of their imagination. So back to Lebowski, there's this theory floating around that Donnie was imaginary as well, because if you take Donnie out of the Big Lebowski,
which has been done, by the way. There is a
okay
on YouTube. I don't remember the exact thing, but I think if you put in, there is a way of watching like some parts of without Donnie.
Yeah,
and it's kind of fucked up. It's
like nothing changes.
Right? Nothing changes. It's just normal. You're like, wait, what? Oh my god, Donnie was not there the whole scene, and I did not even notice.
Yeah, so that's the theory people are floating, is like Donnie was a figment of either Walter or the dude's imagination, just sort of to be there, but didn't have any influence on anything that was going on in the story. So I just thought that was kind of fascinating, because when people start really digging into movies and scratching at, okay, what was going on in the writers' minds? And also, like, sometimes we create art and we're not thinking about it all that deep. Like it's all these other people who are putting it on it, putting all this depth to the art. And I can imagine, I mean, I've had it happen myself, not much because I don't have like a movie out, right? But I can imagine a writer or a director sitting down with a critic or someone who's really thought about this too much or read too many Reddit articles about it and is like, yeah, man, we just thought that scene would be funny. We didn't really like relate it to the end of the world or whatever the conspiracy theory might be.
I mean,
And sometimes,
if you want to go further with this,
yeah.
there's a conspiracy theory regarding the narrator.
Oh,
The idea is that the narrator is the person that concocted the whole entire story from start to finish. So like somebody was explaining to me this like idea, it's like almost like bowling talk,
yeah,
of like these wild and outlandish stories. And like the narrator is kind of like the greatest example, like the Lone Ranger,
yeah, he
sitting
is.
alone by the bar, you know, talking about shit. Like people are like obviously like say debunked because there's a scene where you see the dude with the narrator.
Yeah,
But then again, it's kind of odd where not only is the narrator physically shown, which is not very common in most films, by the way. Just
right,
throwing
right.
that out to most people. Narrators are usually like behind the scene. It's kind of a little interesting in how like the narrator is somebody you physically see at a bar and he's actually drinking.
Yeah.
So I kind of see that idea too,
And he's Sam Elliott, which is super cool.
The man never ages. Like I guarantee when the man is 120, he'd be like, "Can I have another whiskey?"
That's right. You have to use so many swear words, dude. He's like, fuck you talking about? Best stuff. Good stuff.
I mean, it's crazy. Like the man must be in his 80s and he still kind of looks and acts the same. Really hasn't changed. It's just kind of just a little odd. I'm not gonna lie to you.
He's one of those. Yeah.
What's the other one?
We gotta study this. We got Sam Elliott now. We got Willie Nelson and Keith Richards. Apparently, that we need to leave a better world for because they're gonna outlast us all.
And Mick Jagger.
Yeah, he's been around a minute.
It's crazy. Again, like I think, especially when you talk about pioneers and artists and creators, and especially when you're looking at like the indie and underground scene, some of these stories, honestly, they come from real places. All right, let's be real for a second. Some of these very famous people have had some of the most close to near-death experiences. I mean, it's the 70s, and it was the 80s, and it was the 90s, and there really wasn't that much security back in those days.
You're right.
If the Chinese mafia decided that they wanted to slaughter your entire family,
ooh,
they didn't really have a big problem doing that. So you get people, like we were saying earlier, like Quentin Tarantino is a great example, coming out there, like, I don't remember his first film, but his first film was also amazing. And then you got Pulp Fiction, and you got Kill Bill, and it just continues on from there, Once Upon a Time Hollywood. This is coming from a person that, like, had a video store and met some of the most craziest people alive.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? Like,
yeah.
We were like, and you said this in like the very beginning, it's like seeing the artistry in like the smallest of things. It's not just like it's the panels of wood that has the carvings on them.
Yeah.
It's that footprint in the greenway, as you're walking down that like obviously is going to be gone in a few days. Like,
yeah. And like Tarantino's first film, I think it was Reservoir Dogs.
I think so too.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
It was done on a pretty low budget. And that's why it primarily like 90% of the movie, maybe more, takes place just in that warehouse in that one setting. I mean, they start off at the bank. There's a car scene, but pretty much everything after that takes place in that warehouse, and it's really dialogue driven. It's really like anticipation driven, building up that drama and all this stuff. And then the way, again, we got Steve Buscemi in there just
Is
doing
it
his thing.
Buscemi? Oh my god,
Yeah.
we're gonna have this
He's
conversation
Mr.
right
Pink.
now.
He's
Is it
Mr. Pink.
Buscemi or Buscemi? I always
Buscemi. Oh, that's a good question. I don't know. I've never thought about it that hard. Buscemi. Damn.
Buscemi. I just.
Now we're gonna have to.
But he's a very, he's kind of like Christopher Walken, Steve.
Yeah.
The two type of actors. Like if I meet Christopher Walken, I want him to be like, "What are you doing here? Why are you bothering me?"
Yeah. What?
It's those are the type of actors that, especially when I see them in those cult classic films, I'm like, thank you, Jesus. Seriously, thank you, Jesus. Because it's just so right. I cannot imagine Reservoir Dogs without him.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's crazy. He's a legend. Fucking A.
Totally. I mean, so Tarantino likes him. The Coen brothers obviously like him. And it's funny to see, like, let's take the Coen brothers, for example, because they recycle just like Tarantino does. I mean, Tarantino loves his core actors, that he's been using all of his career. But then you got the Coen brothers who love John Goodman, right? They love Steve, whichever way you pronounce his name.
We're just going to call him Steve B. Okay?
Yeah.
For the sake
Stevie
of
B.
argument, Steve B. That's it.
Right. Steve B's a man. So, they used him in Fargo. They used him in a lot of their films. And man, it's just like the people who you think fit a certain type, you see them in a movie where they're not playing their type exactly. You're like, whoa, what just happened? But that actually worked really well. And I think of with the Coen brothers, it took me a couple of watches to realize that the same dude who played Jesus Quintana in Lebowski also played one of the hillbilly.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, was it? What did you do? I didn't see it.
The tongue thing with the ball.
Oh yeah.
Jesus.
Is that nobody fought with the Jesus? That's right.
No, nobody fought with the Jesus.
I love that line so much. And yeah, but the same dude who played Jesus Quintana played one of the hillbilly convicts from Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? And he had the thickest, like, cornbread, sweet tea sounding Alabama accent you've ever heard. And I was like, wait, that's the same dude? And yes, it was. And I was like, mind blown, because
was he
well
Latino?
done. I don't think so. I think he really had to dig deep to figure out that place to go.
No, it's John Turturro that played. Yeah,
Turturro. Yeah. Okay, so I'm wrong about that.
He was also in Severance.
Oh, you what? Okay.
Oh my god! Like, dude, these are some of the greatest actors.
Yeah.
Alive.
Because I mean, like Chameleon, man.
Chameleons.
He was blended in so beautifully with everything he does.
Oh my! What the fuck? Okay, he's originally from Brooklyn. He's from. Oh my god! What is his back? He's Italian.
He's Italian. That's what I thought. That's why I was like, I don't think he's, because I remember an interview with him saying, like, yeah, he really had to figure out. Well, I mean, both roles are crazy, wildly different, right? One he's playing Latino, one he's playing like this Alabama. Like, I don't know, do they have mountains in Alabama? Like Alabama mountain man kind of stuff. But anyway, it was convincing.
Like, it's almost like baffling, because it's almost where you have this actor that not only delivers. Okay, I'm gonna be honest. You have those portrayals where they play in every single movie, and they're kind of the same.
Yeah, they do their shtick, and
I respect Jim Carrey, but Jim Carrey is kind of the actor already. Like, I see him in a movie, I just think Ace Ventura, The Mask. It's just so baked in your head.
Yeah.
Tom Cruise is the same example too. Like, he's great in Mission Impossible, but he's the same in every single movie.
Yeah, he's the confident, get it done, stoic kind of like, yeah, count on him, gonna deliver. Matt Damon, same deal. Now I'll tell you who. Oh, go ahead.
But you don't have the same thing with John Turturro. You don't have the same thing with Steve Buscemi, like, or Steve B, sorry, or Christopher Walken. Like, they become chameleons in every single role that they play. And it's just, it is possible. It is possible for actors to play completely different characters for each movie and be completely different. And it completely works in your mind. Period.
Yeah. And I gotta say, I gotta give a shout out to someone who I never thought I'd be like, wow, that dude's a great actor. And I didn't realize this until I saw one of his earliest movies. But there's few people who don't know the name Leonardo DiCaprio, right? And you expect what you're gonna get from
Leo.
like Titanic.
Oh, Leo.
Right?
Yeah.
So I never even watched Titanic, but I knew about, what he was supposed to be about, the heartthrob and all this stuff. And then he went on to make a bunch of other movies. But it wasn't until I saw this movie where he was just a kid. And it was this movie with Johnny Depp, believe it or not, called What's Eating Gilbert Grape?
Grape. Oh.
Dude, so Leonardo plays an autistic kid. And he's got all the tics, he's got all the everything. And I was watching that, not even enjoying the movie, because the movie's kind of sad. The movie's kind of gets you pissed off pretty much for an hour and a half straight.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, it really is. And but to see his performance and to see how he took that role at that young age, I was like, dude, he's obviously, whatever he does now, he's just doing what the director asked him to do, asked him to bring to it.
I think he's worn. I think he's got the skills. I think he's worn. I think the same thing like applies with a lot of these artists. Like even with Johnny Depp, they're worn out. There's so much that you can pour out of them, and I mean, you take even on the creative side. Take creators like Peter Jackson. Okay. That man deserves a well-deserved break, okay? He was able to do something that no other director in human history has ever been able to do, to take the work of a writer that is no longer alive and meticulously figure out a way of bringing these movies to film. Okay, you want to agree that he kind of messed up with The Hobbit? I hear you, whatever. But I'm talking about, like, especially with like The Lord of the Rings, he stood very, very true to the story. That takes a lot of work, effort, creativity, collaboration, like really understanding what the writer was bringing to the table, especially when you're dealing with these languages that he created as well. Someone like that, I cannot imagine him spending his whole life making 500 movies or 300 movies. Like, if his career consists of 20 or 30, I think he's achieved the most incredible thing as being Peter Jackson.
Yeah.
Hands down.
Do you think there is like a cap? Not a cap necessarily, but do you think everyone kind of like that stupid saying that people say, you only have a certain number of heartbeats in your life, right? And you may as well live it up. You think that's that way for creativity? You think like you dip into the well and the well's pretty full when you're young, and then maybe it dries up a little while, and then you get a little older, you get a little more wisdom, and you're like, let's go. You get a second win. But do you think if people just run too hard, kind of like you were mentioning with the actors, that the well dries up after a while and it's like you can't go back?
I think it's all in your hands, honestly. And I think the greatest example, you want to talk about white privilege, but you got Betty White, which, I mean, she lived until, I think, 99.
Yeah.
Or almost 99. I think she passed away in 98. But her example of you can live a creative life throughout your life, even when you get older. Like she did do TV performances because she wanted to do that, regardless of her age. She loved taking care of animals and took it upon herself to do more for that, even though she was older. You know, and I can hit even home even more, like for example, with like even my own grandmother. My own grandmother is 87. My grandfather passed away a few months, like I think a month or two ago. But she is a very strong woman where she was an aquatics director for many, many years. She likes to be a social person. People love her. People love being there for her. And she is a very creative and meticulous person in the very essence. So I think you're right. It does dry up as you get older. But I think as you get older, you can accept that and realize your limitations and still continue on. You know, if you want, like, the greatest example of that is take Jim Carrey and Cher. I think Jim Carrey is the greatest example of, like, he's in his 60s, he's successful, he doesn't give a fuck.
No.
He doesn't care.
He's done.
He's done. He's like, you want to interview me? Go ahead. Go ahead. I'll interview you. I'll tell you all the problems right now. And it's bananas. Like the comment section is just insane. And it's like, this is an example of what happens to somebody that's like, you know what? I want to be creative, but screw you. Leave me alone. Like I live my life. Let me be who I want to be and continue on with that. Like, I think there maybe are many ways, but I think that is the most successful way if you want to be an artist for the rest of your life.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point that makes me think, okay, maybe there's not a finite amount of creativity, but there is a necessity to keep reinventing. Because like you said about Betty White, you got a person who had a really great career and she played on TV. When she was young, she obviously had really different roles from when she hit Golden Girls. And then Golden Girls, you know, skyrocket success. And for a lot of people, that was their first experience, certainly for me, of who the heck is Betty White? She's this older lady who plays, you know, with these other older ladies, and they live in Florida and they're having a great time. But there's a whole generation before me that knew her as something completely different.
She was before Lucille Ball.
Yeah,
this is the craziest part is like Betty White was on television well before Lucille Ball.
Wow.
And I mean, interesting enough, like Betty did talk about like her relationship with Lucille Ball, you know, but the hilarious part is like, especially for people my age and older, you know, we remember Lucy more than we remember Betty. Remember Betty more of like, you know, 80s and 90s. We don't really remember the Betty from the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
Like also when she was on the Mary Tyler Moore show. You know, I'm like one of those people like I remember that shit. You know, she played that nasty bitch. She plays a really good nasty bitch. I'll tell you that right now.
No, that I watched the Mary Tyler Moore show, like it would come on after school a little bit, but I never really paid too much attention to who was on it. I was more into, you know, Ginger and Marianne from Gilligan's Island. So I was paying attention to that.
I think though, shows like the Mary Tyler Moore show are honestly groundbreaking because if you take that show now, it's not like saying that, oh my God, women should be single forever. Mm-hmm. What it's showcasing is what it's like to be a single woman working in an office in the 1970s. It's like almost like a time portal. It allows us to go back to the 1970s and be like, what would have it been like for a woman to work in a television station in the 1970s? And I don't know if that was done on purpose, but that's kind of what they did. They kind of made a historical television show. You know, it's completely fiction, but like, it's kind of what it is. It's crazy.
Yeah, I love those shows from that era are a ton of fun. You think about all the crazy shows that were going on, like Laverne and Shirley.
Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley. Oh my God,
you got Mork and Mindy. I mean, how crazy is that? Or even crazier. You know, talk about brown breaking or brown. I can't I can't even talk right now. Groundbreaking. You got Three's Company, where
Mhm.
it's these two women living with this guy so they could split rent. But the ruse was he had to pretend he was gay the whole time because the landlord wouldn't let them live together otherwise, right? So the whole time he was hitting on the two girls and all their friends. That was hysterical. But then you got stuff like All in the Family, that the underlying,
The
yeah,
Jeffersons, yeah.
and the
Oh,
Jeffersons sprang out of that, which was huge. I mean, just talking about all the racial stuff that they covered in those under the guise of comedy, and what kind of conversations they probably brought to dinner tables, right? Maybe. I know, probably not where I live in the South, but probably a lot of other places. Yeah, it was just so much fun. And Good Times did the same thing. There were a lot of shows that were similar to that. And they came into people's homes. They allow people to see, even if it was fictional, even if it was supposed to be funny, it allowed people to see, okay, how other people might relate to life, how other families might be operating. And it was a really good peak. And you know what? I hadn't thought about this, but what's your opinion? I don't think there's that kind of diversity in television right now. There's a lot of crazy stuff, but it's not quite that diversity that we had back in those days.
no, I mean, there's a lot of I'm not gonna lie, there's a lot of great TV shows that are out these days. I mean, one thing that's kind of killing it more than anything else is long movie format TV shows, which is kind of what
Oh,
Severance is,
yeah.
which are excellent. I mean, it is a little annoying. You got to wait like for season to season, but it's okay. You know, you get like hour long, like almost movies, and then you can kind of continue on and watch it. But I think the issue is that there was an era where things didn't have to be perfect. You know, it
Mhm.
you kind of knew it was a set. Like obviously, like Cheers is a great example. I mean, they literally were in the same freaking bar
Yeah.
every single time, and like they seem to be miserable, not be able to pay rent, even though the place is constantly busy. Like there's just so many things that just don't make any sense. But the idea is you're watching something as like, you know, just to like relax or unwind. Like keep in mind, back in the day, people just had a television around. Some people would just put things on for noise. You know, people just used to sit down and just like, I don't know, start tinking on their coffee table or something. We exist in a world where everything is so mobile, you know, and
Yeah, yeah.
it's not that we have short extension attention spans. I think what it is that we have attention spans. It's like the second we get hooked into something, we want more. We want
Mhm.
more and more and more and just more. And again, that's I kind of think where we're kind of headed is just that is our past. Our
Yeah.
future is you hope that like comedy has a better future, especially like with you get here and there, but honestly, like it hasn't had a peak in a long ass time. Long
Yeah.
time. I mean, there's sitcoms, but I'm gonna be honest, a lot of them are really bad. Like the last really good one was like The Big Bang Theory, and that was
Mm.
okay at towards the
Yeah.
end.
Yeah. I gotta say, man, I feel like, and I don't know what's real anymore in a lot of cases,
Or
but
what's AI? Uh
well,
oh.
not even that, but I mean, what's real in the public mood, because it felt like for a while there, a lot of writers were, or a lot of performers were afraid to perform certain things, especially comedians, because comedians are supposed to just hold up a mirror to society and like be like, you guys are ridiculous, you're whack.
You're
And
stupid.
then to be able to do that, you got canceled, right? So people were more afraid to take risks than they had been before. Who wants to get canceled, right? Who wants to have to go through all this because they said something back in 1995 that sounded a little off for today's, refined culture.
It's
And
really I want to hit on this too because what you're bringing up is so important. You have like people like Robert Downey Jr. that
mm,
it was in a movie called Tropic Thunder. okay, where he clearly does blackface. And
Oh, I didn't see that.
you
Okay.
have now where he's a part of this whole like franchise and infrastructure of Disney and Marvel.
Yeah.
And he not only becomes like this woke pillar, but he becomes like this liberal political like statesman, even though he's an actor and plays action movies. I'm like, what the hell are you doing, man? You
Yeah.
know, it's like the polar opposite direction. I'm not saying what a person's supposed to be doing. I mean, like, you're an actor. You know, you're a creative person. You know, like, do you see a bunch of artist critics like being your judge? Can you imagine, like, you have a court case and the person that's going to decide if you're going to prison is an art critic that's at Le Monde, that's down the block? I don't think that's going to work, man. You
Yeah.
know?
No, that's actually kind of a cool concept though. But no, you're right. You're right. Like so many people want to get their own personal validation from something external, right? And so for some people that is a certain brand, some people that is a certain celebrity. Oh, I'm going to do whatever they do, but got to realize that people who are in that world, they're pretty insulated, and they're pretty insulated from the problems that you and I probably have in a lot of ways. Now they have their own set of problems that I would never want. You know, I like to be able to walk outside of my house and there's no one there with a camera. I mean, 100% of the time, no one's there with a camera, and I can rely on that. And I can walk down the street with my kids and I can 100% guarantee no one's going to be pointing a camera at me. But also all of the other things that come with that life is sometimes people in the general public kind of expect too much from those that they look up to. Like they expect the answers, and those people are just doing what they can do
To
as well.
survive.
They
Yeah.
they didn't go sit on a mountaintop and get wisdom just because they've been in a couple of successful movies. They probably have the luxury of sitting back and thinking about things when they're not in production, when they're not on a set, because when they're in production, it's brutal. It's just like one thing after another.
And
But then they have,
retakes and reshoots. Yeah. There's a
yeah,
lot of
and then
a lot of pieces.
they have a couple months off. In those couple months, they're probably getting ready for the next thing. They're probably going on some insane workout routine, some insane diet. They're growing their hair, they're cutting their hair, whatever they have to do to be the next thing they have to be. But again, maybe there's some discipline to that the general public can get some information from, but that might not be who to vote for. That might not be who to, what kind of diet to follow, whatever it might be, because their goals are really different from a lot of other people's goals.
They
And
are. Yeah.
it's something that I see keep coming up, and it's always been that way. I mean, that's why before the television media, it was the magazines, right? Whoever was on the cover of the magazine was the person that you looked up to. And then it became politicians until people realized that that's not the way to go. And then it became people in media, people on television, people in the movies. And we've seen how that's gone, man. I mean, everybody who grew up in the 80s loved the Cosby Show, right? And I don't know if you can talk about that too much anymore. It's like, oh yeah, he was such a role model. Okay, how'd that play out in real life? I mean, on television it looked pretty cool, but in real life didn't go so well.
And the reality is this: when you're dealing with people like this, especially on such a high level, you're right. I mean, at the end of the day, they are human beings just like us. And I think what we are seeing now more than ever, and especially like I've been able to talk with filmmakers, and especially within the indie world, where you have independent filmmakers or directors or creative advisors and people that come together, even sometimes with famous people. I mean, I was talking about this in the other episode. There was a movie Substance that came up that had Demi Moore that was starred in the film, and it has nothing to do about celebrity status. It has to do where you have somebody that already has a creative mind and perspective. They have real life things that are going on, and they're able to interact with a story that works for them. That's pretty much what it is. You know, in the end of the day,
Yeah.
it's like these are not role models. These are artists. These are creative people that are just portraying and telling stories through and through. The same idea when you like, again, when you're looking at certain photography or when things are kind of changed, or you can't do that in real life. Like with your physical eyes, you know, a person doesn't physically look like that. That's
Yeah.
all done with lenses and trickery of lights and imagery. You know, we're dealing with things that are not supposed to be real. It's the same thing with movies. It's like, guys, movies don't have to be real. There could be racism in movies. Okay?
Yeah.
They can say faggot and tranny or dyke. I don't give a shit. It's a movie.
It's
Who
a movie.
cares?
Yeah.
Who cares? Like, is it
And
real? Like, is the freaking guy with the gun coming out of the movie and killing you? No. So let him say
yeah.
motherfucker. What's the problem? You know?
And movies are meant to entertain.
Yes.
Sometimes movies, if they choose this, are meant to be thought provoking, which is always kind of fun. And so often when they are, there's that subtle underlying message that you may not catch until a couple of days later. I've had those movies where I watched it and I was like, okay, that was cool. And then 2 or 3 days later, I found myself thinking about part of the movie that either didn't make sense or I was like, what was that all about? And then I realized, oh wow, that was this subtle little undercurrent of a message that, if whether they were intentional about it or not, it's a message I picked up on enough to be thinking about it a few days later. So that's, if people get triggered, it's probably a good thing on the artist. I mean, unless they're just trying to be blatant about it, then I think people would call that maybe something like pornography, right? If they're just shouting out racial stuff to be provocative. But if it's to be thought provoking, or if it lends itself to the story because those people in that situation will really do that,
Yeah.
what's wrong with that? It's
I-
encapsulated. It's its
100%.
own little world, you know?
I know, and the thing again is like the same thing I deal with comedy. Okay, the thing that made great comedy films was that raw element to them.
Yeah.
You know, think about like The Dictator. Yeah. That movie is just Jesus. Try making that in 2025. Good luck.
Yeah,
Ain't
or
happening.
what,
Ain't
Sausage
happening.
Party, or half of the South Park movies.
American Pie is a great example. Try making
Right.
American Pie now.
Yeah.
Good luck. But again, like I would still watch these movies, okay? Am I going to do the stuff that goes on in American Pie? No, I'm not a slut, okay? But I still find it an enjoyable movie. It's the same idea with like American Psycho. It's like, am I going to go out and like start killing people? No. It's a movie like a psychological thriller, the same way like I like reading psychological thrillers. I think they're really great books. It gets you in that first person mindset of a psychopath. That's the idea. It's like you start reading the story, it's like, oh, very nice. And then I like slammed her with the sledgehammer. Whoa! You
Yeah,
did
left turn.
what?
Yeah.
You did what? You know what I mean? So those are great stories. And again, we gotta just get our heads out of this. I feel like a lot of artists are suffering because of this. I feel like a lot of people are finding like depression and anxiety because you can't express yourself here creatively. Like you say the wrong thing on a podcast and you're canceled because
Yeah.
you're not LGBTQ friendly. Like, oh, you're too conservative, or oh, like you're too left wing leaning. It's like, guys, we're all creative. We all like we've been talking about, we all love the same kind of shit. Like, what are we doing here, man? Like, we gotta be able to support support artists across that chart. That even means the marketing director.
Yeah. And free speech is pretty cool until someone feels like they've been victimized by it, right? And the key word there is feels, because being something, having something done to you, those are real things, but feeling like that was done to you may or may not be real, right? And so it seems like there's a big discrepancy nowadays with what things feel like and what things actually are. When I hear a lot of the comments, when I see some of the YouTube videos where people are reacting to a certain artist, or they're reacting to a certain actor who maybe said something in an interview that caught the attention of one of the news, whichever left or right fits their agenda, and they latch onto that, and they maybe slice it up in editing so it sounds pretty triggering to a group that feels marginalized or may actually truly be marginalized, because there's data about a lot of that stuff, but there's no data on your feelings typically. So that's where it gets really mushy, and comedians are supposed to be able to just say the craziest shit ever and make you laugh. But then also, if they're good at what they do, they make you think. Like George Carlin was really good at that.
Oh my god.
Yeah. He was so good at that, and you were like, whoa, that dude's kind of raunchy, but also he's not far off from being right about
No,
that.
especially like his like prediction before 9/11. It's so funny, but it's kind of scary at the same time. You know which bit? Do you know which bit I'm talking about?
No, I don't. No.
He was talking about if you're a white person, you can walk through security with a machete. I have to find the clip, but it was hilarious because he was like kind of making fun of security, where you like can walk in with like a razor blade,
Yeah.
you can make a bomb, and he's just like going on and explaining it. And again, like this is and everybody's like kind of like laughing, ha ha ha. This is like kind of funny, but then to see it again afterwards, you're like, damn, was he onto something?
Yeah. Did he come from the future to tell us about things?
I
That's
wish he
great.
was. I mean, he was old when he passed away, but honestly, like that man had just he had that moment, and it's so true. There are comedians where they just get to a moment, like great examples, like also Bert Kreischer. Fuck it, this is what I do.
Yeah.
Like Bert Kreischer's obvious thing is like he doesn't wear a shirt on stage.
Right.
And
Yeah.
if the venue doesn't allow him not to wear a shirt, he's like, "Screw you! I'm not coming here." Like, like my whole thing is I take off my shirt.
Yeah. That's his deal.
That's
Like
his deal.
Richard Pryor was like that too, back in the day, like way back in the day.
I think it was like he had to say motherfucker, or I don't know. There was like a whole. There's like something he had to say, like some like nasty slur. But again, that is I feel like the true definition of artistry and comedy, and it's not supposed to be. I'm gonna say this again. It's not supposed to be real. Like people, like get out of your thick skin, like.
And people, it feels like a lot of people, when I see the comments, of course, those are the people who just didn't just think something. They had to go and express themselves, and that's okay. I think people expressing themselves is great. Tell us how you feel. We may or may not care. It may not relate to us. It might give us something to think about, but it's like people are trying to figure things out in real time, and that's how we all have to process. But maybe just don't say things until you've processed. You know what I mean? And I've seen processing happening in real time. You just mentioned 9/11, and I'll never forget. I talk about this when I'm teaching photography too, because I photograph people a lot. And when you photograph people, you're less of a photographer and you're more of a coach, in terms of getting that person comfortable if you want them to be comfortable.
You have to
If you don't,
almost direct them, to get
yeah,
that
it's
that position. Hmm.
exactly, it's
Yeah,
like a director. And but a photograph of a person is about lighting, it's about the lens you select, it's about what background, all those things are fantastic, but more so it's about body language. It's about connection with that person to the camera. And I was in New York the month after 9/11. I was there for some work, and the the stuff was still going on. They were still had, all the heavy equipment trying to clear the site. There was still smoke coming up from parts of the site. And there were all these barriers around, and there were these notes that people had written on them. And they had them, it was like chain link, but they had it covered so you couldn't really see, but you could kind of see over of what was going on the site. But the point I tell all my photography students when I teach is there were people lined up all the way down that fence outside of the site and even across the street. And they were, for whatever reason, they felt the need to be a part of that moment in time and get their photo taken in front of that site to kind of prove to themselves and the world they were there. But what I noticed, and okay, that's one thing. But what I noticed about these people is they didn't know how to act when they were doing that. Part of them wanted to be part of that moment in time. Not that it was a happy part of history, but it's just that they were there in that part of history. And so they felt the need to prove it with a photo, right? But at the same time, they knew this was not Disney World and it was not a smiley photo. They knew it. They didn't want to really seem mad or sad or cry when they're looking at the camera. So they literally didn't know how to act. And I watched this happen over and over because it's my job to observe things, to observe people. And I just sat back and I watched this happen for like an hour. Tourists would come by and they would try to get that photo, and they would try a couple of different times to be like, oh yeah, that one doesn't look good. That one's too happy. That one's too this or that. And it's informed. I mean, that was 24 years ago, right? So it's informed so much of what I think about when I am talking to people, when I'm working with people, and just understanding and being empathetic to the fact that people are working out shit in real time. They sometimes don't even know how to think about it or uh, react to it. And that's what we see a lot is people getting triggered, people getting their feelings hurt, people feeling like a victim when they're doing fine. They've been offended and they don't like what the other person's saying, and they have to figure out a way to deal with it. So I don't know. That's I have compassion for those people because they're figuring their shit out. But at the
they
same
are.
time, I don't have much tolerance for like entertaining it. Like I'll listen to it. I'll have some compassion, but like if they're like, oh no, this person should be canceled because they said something that offended someone else, I'm like, it's good to be offended every once in a while. It helps you check in with yourself, what your values are, right?
I feel I feel you in a way that honestly, you take people like, even for example, like, we've been talking about people like this entire episode, like even like J.K. Rowling.
Mm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
I consider myself a part of the LGBT community, and I don't find her to be transphobic or offensive in any shape or form. People can say, well, that's my personal opinion. I mean, the end of the day, she wrote some really great literature that I think most of us can agree we all like and enjoy. I spent my childhood reading her series and being very engulfed and like having conversations and like eventually like meeting people who are also interested. So that to me is her legacy, and I respect her as a writer for what she's done. And I think at the end of the day, it's like people are going to be people, regardless of all the shit that's going on. It's like if we figure out a way of like, oh well, this artist can't make stuff because they've done this and this. It's like, just stop.
Yeah.
Just stop. You know what? Like, people are like, well, Quentin Tarantino can continue making his shit because he's been doing this for years. He can continue doing this shit because he's really good at it. Okay,
Yeah.
and people don't give a shit that there's nudity in his films and there's like blood and gore and like
Lots of feet.
lots
So
of
many fucking feet.
so many feet.
Jesus. I can't.
I feel bad
Not
for
a
his wife, but maybe
not a
she
foot
enjoys it.
person, man. Yeah, maybe. uh, man. But no, I hear you because everybody's perspective, and I love talking about perspective because everybody's got one, and they don't always line up, and that's totally okay until someone is truly getting hurt by it. Then it's a problem. But I don't know how much more time you want to spend because I had some crazy stuff going on
Oh,
yesterday.
we can, if you
kind
got time, we can keep going.
okay, dude. Okay, total rabbit hole. But yesterday I went back down. I told you I went back down to Wilmington. I was doing some videos, some B-roll for this.
North Carolina?
Yeah, North Carolina.
Okay, yeah. Okay.
So it's a port city. It's on the west side of town. It's got a river. It was very active a couple hundred years ago in the colonies, all that good stuff. But on the east side, it's got a beach, so it's popular for that. But I was on the downtown side where the river is, and I went there to visit this house. It's an old house. It was built in 1861, the year that the Civil War broke out, and being in Wilmington, the person who had the house, they had enslaved people working at the house. It's this huge mansion. It's 4 floors. It's got the huge columns. It's amazing looking. But to know that it was built by people who were enslaved is kind of like, wow, that seems like that's not objectively not a good thing, right? So this person had a daughter, and this daughter is what I was kind of interested in because I heard some things about her. She was born in 1852, before the Civil War. Well, she lived a long ass life. She died at 93. So she died in 1946.
So she saw the
She
Civil
saw
War,
the Civil War, World
War
War
One, and World War Two.
and World War II. Yeah. And so what happened was, and a lot of these coastal towns back in the 1800s, yellow fever was a big problem. And in around 1865, when the Civil War was wrapping up, there was a yellow fever outbreak in Wilmington. So the whole family had to move out to the country where there weren't as many mosquitoes and, with the water and stuff the way it was right there next to the river and the marshes. So they vacated the house, as did most of all the rich people in downtown. And then it was that same year that one of the forts fell, and basically the Union cleaned house, and the Union came into downtown, took over all the rich people's houses as their headquarters. And so these people essentially lost their property, and they lost the rights. The government took over their property. I'm saying all this to say that eventually the family got their property back. They had to write a letter to the government saying, okay, sure, we acknowledge the United States of America as the real government and blah, blah, blah. And they got their property back. And this lady lived in that house. She was the last person to ever live there. She never got married. And she lived in the house until 1946, when she died at age 93. And the thing I thought interesting, and the thing that weaves into this whole topic of perspective, is the fact that I heard a rumor, and I had to buy her biography or memoir to see if it corroborated this, because my brain
She had a
couldn't.
memoir?
It's like this thick. It's maybe 45 pages. And so it mostly, as I flip through it, because I just got it yesterday, it's mostly like maps of where the house started and how the city took over parts of the lot and all these things. So it's not really interesting. It's not a narrative as far as I can tell. It's got a lot of dates. But what someone told me that I really want to corroborate is, and I don't know why I want to corroborate it. It's just I'm fascinated, but they said that she never accepted the United States as a country. She would never allow a U.S. flag to be flown anywhere around her property. And I mean, we're talking, she died in 1946. This was after World War I and II, and the United States was,
Well
pretty
established.
solid at
Yeah.
that point. But to be 93 years old, having lived through, a government seizing all of your property and then getting all of that property back and enjoying the fruits of, I guess, the fruits of the labor of people who were oppressed
Mm-hmm.
because the next generation up, made some interesting, not so great decisions for those folks. But then to kind of harbor that for the next however many decades is something I've never really run up against in my brain. So I want to find out if that's real, because then I would just be like, whoa, that's a whole new perspective that I didn't know could exist. I'll put it that way.
It's so baffling because when you look at our today's society compared to the Jim Crow era, and then you kind of forward back to like the 1860s when there was the you know, blah, the I don't remember, I can't say the word.
Oh, the abolition,
The end of
emancipation.
slavery. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you end up in this situation where people like to hold on to the past and the idea of the past, even though that we live in the present.
Yeah.
It's this like idea of like, we can't make a comedy slave movie because that would be racist.
Oh.
I'm just like,
and because Mel Brooks isn't probably up for it.
probably
He would be
not.
the guy. He would
be the guy. I mean, if you got Chris Brown and Chris Rock,
oh gosh,
and J-Lo.
Well, because he's Mel
J-Lo.
Brooks, he would start with the Jews in Egypt. He would start historically, I would think, because he would go that angle. He'd go the Egyptian pyramid angle and
if
then
he's
work
going
up
that,
to the present.
Steve B's got to be in there, okay?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, but no, that's a tongue in cheek. But you're right. Like, that would not be something that our current society, even me, I mean, I would be like, oh, okay, somebody will probably watch that movie. But I'm pretty picky with like what I put in my brain. And so I want to make sure it's either thought provoking or it really pisses me off, so that I can toy around with it in my brain and make sure that whatever comes out is going to be good for the people around me, the people, the ripple effect that's going to have in the world. But you're right. Like, a lot of people wouldn't be ready for that, but it could have happened in the 70s and 80s though. Like when you're talking about the, I mean, there was a lot of racially like suspicious stuff that was going around, the blaxploitation, all the Shaft and
a lot of
Dolomite.
erotica. Like, there was
Yeah.
tons. And again, like a lot of people, especially again, and I think we were touching on this earlier, is like when you mix this idea of like you can only be conservative and you can only be liberal, you can't be in between and have like mixture of ideas. And this idea of where, if you're supposedly like more faithful or religious, quote unquote, you can't have this kind of erotica in films and movie. And I'm like, one of those kind of people is like, man, we're all adults, okay? I sometimes, like, if I'm watching a movie and there's like a burlesque scene going on, bring me those damn fat titties, okay? Like, and it's just the art of creativity and entertainment. That's just, the general way of sometimes being able to make those avant-garde films, or just being able to express yourself as an artist. I just feel like whenever we mix our just like religious beliefs and our like fucking political mindset and garbage into films, you end up like, I didn't even want to mention this. It's like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs that recently came out. Like, that's what happens to movies if we take all of our shit and shove it on creators.
Yeah.
That's what happens. Okay. I'll be honest. I think like if we don't veer off into the other direction, which again, I feel like the independent film industries right now doing a lot better, than the mainstream, people are just not going to be interested. You know, you're
Mhm.
just making, especially even kids, like, come on, man. Like, we both know, like, growing up as a kid, being able to, like, find those movies that, like, inspired you and, like, you connected with, and you're like, holy shit. Imagine the poor kids now. Like, look at the
Yeah.
garbage that they have
Seeing the
available. Like,
same Marvel movie over and over again with different scenarios, right? Yeah. There's only
it,
so much of that I can take.
right? And I'll be honest with you, like, you talk to these kids seriously, like, I guarantee you they feel the same way that we do. Okay? Like, they have to, all right? They're like so engulfed in technology and like have so much at their fingertips. Why on earth would they be interested in being entertained by like the bullshit they hear their parents
Mm,
watching or dealing
yeah.
with? They're like this sucks, man.
Yeah.
You know, like we need another Big Lebowski. Like, and again, it's like kind of where like dude culture came from in the 90s. That's kind of where a lot of those films came from. Like, they're not supposed to make sense. They're just supposed to be
Right.
fun. It's just
They
a
don't all
fun,
Yeah,
yeah.
they don't get all wrapped up at the end like you would hope for. Well, some of them do, but yeah.
I miss that shit,
Yeah.
man. I like there has been some hits. Like I was talking earlier, like Burt Kreischer did come out with that comedy film last year, which was that was good.
I got to check that. Haven't seen it.
It was so good. It brings you back. Like that movie was only made because Burt Kreischer decided to make it. We
Right
need that,
on.
man. We really do.
Yeah.
We need that creativity back. And I think like I think especially you is a great example of this. It's like it does exist. We are real. We're out there. You just you could find us, you know? You can find us. We got
If you go
websites, we
looking,
get social
have to go
media.
looking.
Like it's just I feel like it's a slow progress. Like eventually it's gonna start picking up where the underground is gonna become the mainstream.
Hmm.
There's gonna be that 180-degree flip. When that's going to happen, I don't know, but I feel that we just have to be prepared that that is the direction that we're going. It's because people want truth, they want honesty, they want real creativity, they want real photography, they want real writing, they want real stories, they want real fucking movies where actors are okay with doing blackface, even if they're Steve B. Okay, hands down.
Well, that's interesting. I think it's going to get even more accelerated pretty soon because people are going to, especially, well, I don't know if kids will because kids won't know the difference. Like you and I, we grew up on a lot of that real stuff, and you don't know what's real anymore with all the AI stuff. You don't know what video clip's real. You don't know what news clip is real. You don't know. It's almost all going to be viewed suspiciously by those of us who knew the difference long ago. But also, we recognize that this stuff's getting good enough to fool us. So, okay, do we move forward in our history in our lives just knowing that everything could be completely the matrix and just being pulled over our eyes, right? Or whereas like my kids, that's how they're growing up, and so it is real to them. Because it's the only thing they've ever known, but everything's so damn polished now. It's like getting back to making something gritty or bringing something gritty that really reflects human nature back to people is at some point going to be welcomed and probably demanded because it's going to be rewarded. I think maybe not by the mainstream because the mainstream doesn't tend to reward, you know, people holding a mirror up to them, right? But the people who want to keep it real, uh, those are the folks who are going to start demanding, hey, we want to know this is real. We want to know that this was written by a person with actual experiences and emotions and things that I could maybe relate to. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think also like to your point, what the 80s did to create what we got out of the 90s, I think what the 2020s is going to do to the 2030s. Like, we are going to look at a time where, yeah, there's a lot of negatives when it comes to AI and a lot of augmentation and advancements we have with software. But again, this has given underground artists, particular filmmakers, the ability to create films, especially even using real world settings
Yeah.
for, you know, a lot better budgets than a lot of the mainstream are doing. And I mean, they're using a lot of CGI.
Hmm.
So, you know, it's like if you don't catch up, the other one's going to beat you. It's
Yeah.
kind of like the end game. It's like it's not where you have two industries that are fighting against each other. You have two different engines, right? I like that. Engines that are both helping operate two different types of applications. One that is solely focused on money, marketing, and consumers, whereas the other one is more focused on branding, collaboration, and artistic vision. Like, how can
Mm.
we as a community get this thing out there and get this made? Like, how can we get this to this film? And like, that's the same idea of like film festivals. Like, you go to a film
Yeah.
festival to be a part of that. And the cool thing a lot of times with film festivals, you get to meet the people that actually were in the films. So
Yeah.
you get to actually talk to the actors and like you have those like burning questions after watching. Like, oh hey, can I ask you? Like, oh sure. And you get
Yeah.
that out there. You're like, oh, you don't get that sometimes. And I'm like, I love those moments. I love them. They're
Yeah.
amazing.
No, it's times are changing, but that's cool. Times are always a changing.
Great Bob
And
Dylan song.
that's a great thing about time. It just keeps floating on. If you're here to be part of it, then cool. Just saddle up, right? Just get ready because it can change for the better for a lot of people, and that's not going to be better for a certain group of people. It's never going to be different. So just get in where you fit in, right?
Find your niche.
Yeah.
Find your jive. Wanted to use that for a while. Okay.
I like it. I like it, man. That's cool. This has been fun talk.
It has been, man. James, the biggest question out there is where can these wonderful people find your art, your socials, that magic place
Yeah.
where they can find your cool shit?
Yeah. Everything happens for me through my website, which is easy, jameswalters.com. And
Easy
all the
peasy lemon
socials are there.
squeezy.
All the stuff. Yeah. All the pics.
All the pictures. Like you have I think yeah, you do. You have a whole catalog of all the pictures and stuff that you've worked on.
Yeah, like that one has a lot of I love to do environmental portraits, which is basically people in their world. If they're a race car driver, want to get them, around that world. I don't have any race car drivers on there. That was a long time ago that I did that kind of work. But no, what's on there now is a lot of creative entrepreneurs. I work with a lot of people who just are great at what they do, and I like to show them immersed in their world. So that's part of what's on there. It's a little bit about me. It's going to have some of the stuff about the books. That's coming out this week on.
And that would be a Joyful Rebellion.
Well, that's the podcast. So I do a podcast every week called A Joyful Rebellion. It's the whole theme of that is about that time in people's lives where they've kind of checked all the boxes. They are outwardly successful. They've maybe done the work to get that degree or that job or that spouse, that family, and did all the things that people told them to do to make them happy and successful. And they look around and they're like, man, I'm not feeling it. Right. And so the joyful rebellion part is where they have to figure out, okay, what's next? What am I going to do to live a life that I love, to feel like I'm writing the script to my own movie, like to put it in what we've been talking about here. So I like to talk to people who have been through that process. And I talk to a lot of people who, now that they've been through that process, they help other people through that process too. And that's been really fascinating, having all those conversations and every week just talking to somebody about a completely different topic.
I think that's amazing. And again, like that's kind of the joy, especially when it comes to podcasting, right? You get
Yeah,
to interact with different stories, different people from different places, and it can just go on and on and on. And it's just, especially when you're a photographer, you can kind of almost like picture yourself in that setting, like where they
totally.
are or like what's
Yeah.
going on. And I think it's incredible. It's amazing.
That's the
Uh,
cool thing about it. Yeah.
you said you had a book though that was coming out. What is the name of the new book that's coming out?
Yeah, it's called Meditations of the Mundane, and it's a black and white coffee table size book. So it's a pretty large book, black and white photos. Every photo has a complimentary story on the other page that's written
Ooh.
from the perspective of whatever object it is that's in that image. It could be simple as a hair tie, like you hold a ponytail with, or
Yeah, I see that. Or a dishwasher.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh wow. Or like a porta potty. That is
yeah.
I like
They
that.
Those porta potties are judgy because they're out in the suburbs and they get to see all the soccer moms all day long and how they raise their kids. So they're pretty judgy porta potties.
I mean, and also like especially like with that brickwork, like the brick and then you have the rocks, the
Yeah. Oh
separation.
yeah. Yeah.
Damn man, like wow. Okay, this
That
is
brick
a
was that brick was pissed because it was like it was a sidewalk. It was made around the 40s. And of course, all these stories I made up, they're from my imagination, right? But they're from the perspective of that thing. So I got to use a lot of different perspectives in the writing of the book. And that was a blast. So that was a creative part for me. Not so much the pictures, but the writing for sure.
you need I'm not saying obviously like you need, but I'm just like throwing this idea out there. Like I don't know if you've ever done this before. Like the opportunity to like go to one of those rural places where the person has like tons of old cars on the lot
Oh, yeah.
and just start like taking pictures and stuff. Like dude, I'm like going through this intro and there's just like insane picture after insane. Like there's one of like this abandoned like sandwich shop.
Oh
It's
yeah, that one's fun. And that's one of those places, it's not there anymore. Like it was a moment in time, but it's not there anymore. So it's cool. And it's this glossy bougie, uh, like I think it's a ramen shop now. So
ah,
yeah, back and I love them as some ramen, but
I know, but
still.
that sandwich shop, like I could just imagine Italian being like, "What do you want? You want some
Right.
gabagool? Put some gabagool. Put a little mozzarella. Put a little balsamic." Yeah.
Yeah. Those good times. And yeah, in some ways it's a history book almost as much as
It
it
is.
is just a bunch of short stories put together.
I mean, like I think the short stories add that extra oomph and element to it as well. It allows you to like almost get immersed in the picture,
Yeah.
for like a brief moment. And again, man, like this is what we're talking about the whole time. Like when you mix artistry, especially like when you have podcasting, in your case, like you're even creating like with this book, like this almost noir
Mm.
memoir to
Hmm.
each, like, right? It's like almost like a noir
Yeah.
memoir to each picture. This is coming from a creative mind and lens. Like it's not supposed to be like, oh my god, like what is James like deep like behind the scenes? Like what is he trying to get at? Like no man, like
Yeah.
James is just giving you really cool pictures with a little cool little fictional story to go with it. Like that's it.
And I was trying to be really careful about that because there are a lot of the stories that are completely different from how I think about the world and how I interact with the world.
A
And
hundred
that was just
percent. Yeah.
what that's what that thing was about. It wasn't about me. So, and there are some things that line up more with what I'm about, but that's just because when I looked at that object, I was like, okay, maybe this is weird like me. And we went with
And that's
it.
okay. Honestly, that's okay. Like I think again, James, I'll be honest, like you are create like freaking fantastic as an artist. And like on top of that, being able to like bring all of these elements together and like be able to make a book and be able to do a podcast and all the things, like it's really incredible. And again, like
Thanks,
I
man.
I try to say this every single podcast. You don't need to be freaking like Beyonce or I
No.
don't like Theo Vaughn or what. I don't give a shit. Like you just got to be you, you know? And that's what shines through. Like, that's what people resonate with the most is you be the best artist for yourself, not for anybody else.
Yeah. And that is really difficult. And it's not you don't
easy.
get as many applause.
No.
But the ones you do are real and they're not just jumping on the bandwagon. So
they want to hear what you got
appreciate
next.
saying that.
They want to learn, like we were talking before, like get into the rabbit hole. Like people, when you finish this episode, you want to get into James Walters, bleh, my brain is fucking fried right now. You want to get into a rabbit hole, you could like check out, and I'm sure like go through the podcast as well. But like, again, you got to be able to start your own journey. And where are you going to start it? Where are you going to start?
Yeah, just start right where you are. And that was the hardest thing for me to figure out is I'm one of those over researchers. So I'll research something, but man, just getting started. And I talk about that so much on the podcast now that I've realized it and embraced it. And if I'm starting something new, I'll just start and then fumble my way through it and figure it out.
It's a joyful rebellion.
Yeah, man. Very much. Very much.
Hey, thank you for letting me throw that in there. But again, James, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on. To anybody out there that wants to check out more of the podcast, you can find us at Lost in the Groove Pod everywhere and anywhere. So with that, catch you next week. Peace out.